Peesker, President, Worldwide Small, Medium Corporate and Digital Sales, joins me for a conversation today about leadership. Kevin is a proven transformational leader with an exceptional track record of driving growth and creating customer-centric organizations. Kevin's extensive experience in sales, marketing, finance, and operations, and international business is so unique. He has passionately pursued successful outcomes for customers and partners, and his teams in multiple industries across Canada, Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa, and the Americas. His commitment to customers and colleagues is unprecedented. Widely respected for his unique brand of inspirational leadership and consistent delivery of business results, Kevin is proud to lead a global small, medium, corporate, and digital sales business for Microsoft. Personally, I've been fortunate to be part of his organization and witness a lot of the great impact that he's had, which is why I've asked him to come and have a conversation with me about leadership. So Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, thank you very much for the invitation, Rashawn. Let's have some fun today. And I think we're going to have a bit of a good dialogue around being global citizens, the two of us. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Kevin, there's so much I can talk about, right? But I want to start off a little bit with you as a person, the early days, the first job, the first venture into this career, and some of the foundational, I would say, skills and lessons that you might have got with you that carried you and brought you to the role that you're in today.
Sure, fantastic. Well, I'm a bit old, Rashawn, so you're gonna push me all the way back into when I go to first job, which was over 4 decades ago. So that's a long time. But maybe I'll start with my background. By way of background, I am a citizen of both Canada and Australia. So go Aussies, go Canadians. I grew up in the middle of Canada, which we call the Prairies. It's the flat land of Canada. And in my youth, I will admit, I had a bit of curiosity about the world. Subsequently, I've been fortunate to travel to over 70 countries, live on 5 continents. You mentioned some of the areas that I've lived on or done some work in. But over 32 years, I have been in this incredible technology industry. So I've seen a lot. I'm sure I'll see more, or hopefully I will anyway. Hopefully I'll be above ground and get to see more. That'd be fantastic. Just going back to my first job. So, man, I haven't thought about this for a while. It was a while ago. And to frame it, it was pre-cell phone, pre-computer in people's homes, except maybe for the really rich folks. I wasn't one of those. And it was absolutely pre-internet for the masses. Maybe DARPA or somebody had internet going, but it was not something that was available for the rest of us. I was actually 14 years of age, and my first job was collecting grocery shopping carts from the parking lots of the grocery store. I did a really good job, and after a year of doing that, I was allowed into the store to sweep floors and pack people's bags and do price checks running around the store. And eventually, I performed so well that I had the opportunity to stock shelves, to work in a bakery, baking bread and donuts first thing in the morning before the sun was up, so that people would have a fresh bakery and items to be able to consume that day. So that was just the extent of my first roles. I did, though, graduate from the grocery store. I worked at a golf course cleaning members' golf clubs and picking up golf balls on the driving range. Along the way, I cleaned a lot of toilets and handled a lot of garbage. So as you can see from all of this, I was perfectly built for the technology industry. By the way, what was your first job? Just before I go further on that one.
I sold toys. I actually knocked on houses and sold toys back in South Africa. Yeah, and it was a pretty cool experience, to be honest, because now I have 2 kids, and you'd be surprised at how much I know about educational and applicable toys for their ages. Right? Who knew?
Who knew that would come full circle? Well, yeah, I bet you're popular in your house then. You'd have good you'd be the aficionado of toys.
I'd like to believe that I'm popular, Kevin. That's the whole trick.
I love it.
Appreciate you sharing that. Like, pretty cool journey, and a lot that has been done there in terms of your early days, like in terms of grit, determination, hard work, and learning a lot of disciplines, right? I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, like some of the foundational lessons that you've
Yeah,
carried with you. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Maybe, I think along the way, when you do what I would call the roles that a lot of people do around society, and often as human beings, I've ingrained this into my children of just recognize what occurs around you. All of the people in various service roles that allow the world to operate as the world operates. When you do some of the roles that are more repetitive in nature, I think you build a sense of humility. And regardless of what the role is, there's this accountability and responsibility that has to be applied to it if you're going to do it well. And so the basics of, when you're 14 years of age, getting yourself to work on time, to listen to instructions, to do the work that's expected. And then what was taught to me and ingrained in me by my parents, it was to do far more than what was expected. And I think this aspect of also what work teaches you, or taught me for sure in the early days, was this concept that you are no longer fully ingrained in self-interest, that you actually have to work with others. You have to work with colleagues from different environments to respect them and build relationships, to be positive regardless of the conditions that you have. And just as a sharing, for those listeners who may not be familiar with Canada or the Prairies, when I was picking up grocery carts and corralling them from the parking lot, during the winter months of Canada, it was often minus 30 to minus 40 degrees centigrade. And pushing those carts with their tiny little wheels through a foot or 1/3 a meter of snow, that was a stress physically. And so there's this idea that you really, in the simple jobs, and as you go from simple jobs to increasing complexity, there was a few things that I feel maybe resonated along the way in my career. And one of them, I remember very early on, I am reasonably competitive, Rashawn, and this idea of playing a game within my own head when I was doing let's call it a repetitive task, was I pushed myself to see how much more efficiently could I do the task. If I did it in 10 minutes, could I do it in 9 minutes the next day, or 8 minutes, and maintain the quality of that job? So effectively, this idea of just that, let's say, a little bit mundane in some cases, but how could I map out the parking lot to be more efficient in coverage, in sweeping the floors? What was the optimum way to sweep the floors and get that done in the shortest amount of time? And then maybe another element that you find in most ranges of work is this experience of engaging with customers, the range of emotions and styles that people have, and how they engage, even when they do simple things such as shop for groceries. It was really the beginning of me being aware of those around me, which for most 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, they do not possess naturally. I've killed children that have gone through that stage. They do not possess it naturally. And so it's a learned behavior. So as I look back and maybe just flash forward to Microsoft and where I am today, I think some of those learnings from the first role remain foundational. So let's go through it. Respect for those around you, people you work with, people you serve. Doing the right thing even when no one is watching. We talk about that as integrity. Being accountable to do what you say you will do. I feel like I'm a grandmother or grandfather. Always be learning to take steps to improve. This idea of continuous improvement and having a growth mindset. Do your best to view the world from the lens of others. So we put those together: respect, integrity, accountability. Those are three of the core values within Microsoft. Growth mindset, customer centricity. Those are core elements of Microsoft's culture. The idea of coming together as a community where people support one another rather than bring them down. Within Microsoft, we talk about that as the essence of one Microsoft. When an organization comes together as one organization, not as mismatched piece parts, we see incredible outcomes occur. So somehow, out of pushing shopping carts and sweeping floors, I think some of those early learnings in life have progressed in terms of my experience at Microsoft.
I love how that entire experience grounded you in a lot of the values you talked about there around respect, accountability, and integrity. And I wrote down some of the things you were talking about there, right? In those values, a lot of the habits that you demonstrate and execute, and how you command and control and influence people around you in the conditions that you talked about as well, which I thought I picked up, right? And just in terms of having that element of competitiveness with yourself to measure, impact your own growth, but also still be grounded in your values as well to make that broader impact. I sincerely appreciate you sharing that, by the way. Very, very, very well articulated. I have to ask you, though, just very recently, very well recognized executive across Canada, responsible for a very large organization with a broad impact across the economy, customers, partners, people, and obviously yourself, as you talked about, right? And then you took on a global role, a very large role with multiple different businesses within that organization. And we talked a lot about your values there. We talked a lot about your experience there, right? But I'd be curious to learn about how you first tell me a little bit about the global business. And then in addition, maybe tell me a little bit about how do you unify all those businesses together and create a little bit of a shared vision across the entire organization in the world?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Boy, and I think any leader who has any size of team understands that one of the key elements that you are responsible for as a leader is to unify the team that you have, but also to ensure that your team does not operate as an island and is connected and collaborative with all of the stakeholders around it. So that's just an overall leadership statement, and something that I continue to look myself in the mirror when I wake up. Am I achieving that? Because it's hard to do. SMC, going back to it, SMC is a Microsoft acronym. I know I was just with a CEO of 3M at an event last night, and we were talking about the acronyms of our businesses. So I know Microsoft's not alone in having acronyms. It stretches across many industries. It stands for small, medium, corporate accounts. We also align that with our digital sales initiatives. It's a multi-thousand person strong organization. It's complemented by a partner ecosystem that is second to none in the technology industry, and frankly is one of the most robust partner ecosystems in any industry. From a Microsoft perspective, we, outside of 11,000 of the largest organizations and government departments on the planet, which are served by my amazing colleagues in our enterprise industry and public sector motions, the SMC team has a responsibility to activate our mission across literally tens of millions of organizations in every region, which is approximately represents 180 countries around the globe. So that's what we do. That's who we are. It's fantastic. Now, this aspect of how do we bring it together is, boy, that's a really, really big question. I've just gone through the process of a reorganization or an alignment as we made a decision to combine a couple of core elements of Microsoft's business into one. So this idea of a one SMC, or an aligned motion that we activate globally as a team. And having lived on 5 continents and engaged in the 70 countries, while humanity has probably more so in common than we have that differentiate us, there are nuances around the world. There are nuances in regions and by countries, and of course language plays an impact, as well as cultural mores in various countries. So bringing together an organization of that scope is a challenge. And I think this is, yeah, so I mean, you could feel it. I think my experience here, though, is what's the galvanizing principle by which people can align regardless of their background? And for us as a company, Satya, I believe, did some foundational work with our executive leadership team a number of years ago when he first came in as CEO by establishing a mission for the organization. And I know our leadership team spent considerable cycles refining the mission statement for the company. And it's been consistent for, I think, 8 years now or more. It is simply to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And so that's kind of bold, in a way, a little bit arrogant. Every person means 8 billion people. Can one organization truly empower 8 billion people? Well, I think that aspiration is there, and it's the right aspiration. And so as a galvanizing force for pulling together members of the global SMC team, pulling together and aligning with our partner ecosystem, working with the stakeholders that surround the SMC and partner organization from internally in Microsoft, our engineering teams, and many other groups, aligning to that concept that we are here to serve others, that when we do our job well, we will enhance the economic outcomes in each market that we operate within. We will enhance the capability and the skills of individuals that we engage with to provide them with potentially new paths in their careers or in the way in which they impact others. It's, to me, that's been the aligning force that has allowed us to pull our teams together and to navigate across cultural elements to be unified as one in our mission to serve.
So it's really taking that mission, right? But really elevating the level of clarity that you create across all the different organizations and businesses that you bring together to really inspire the impact of the aspirations we try to have, right? And so I
Yes.
love that element of clarity that's created there. And I want to talk a little bit about, just in terms of cultural adaptability, because you've obviously lived in a lot of different places. And you mentioned this earlier on when you talked about a leader's role around unifying an organization, right? And then you talked a lot there about creating that clarity in the organization around how you elevate the impact of the mission. Maybe tell me a little bit about cultural adaptability, right? Because you said it right there. There's a lot of different countries, a lot of different languages, a lot of diverse backgrounds. And I'd be curious to learn about how you apply cultural adaptability and still drive consistency around results at the same time across multiple different regions.
Yeah, great call, great question. There was an interesting session I went through with the Canadian International Development Agency before I left Canada to work in Africa for the first time. And it was a program that was literally delivered and engaged with for Canada's Foreign Service. So the diplomats of Canada that would go across the world to engage in the countries so that Canada would be a positive force for on the global scene and be additive within the countries we serve and also drive economic connections. The fascinating element about some of that training was this understanding that whenever you engage with a new culture, there are elements that are the same and there are elements that are different. Okay, we all would understand that. What is fascinating is a person literally goes through a life cycle, a peak and a trough, whenever they go into a culture for more than, let's call it, a vacation for a week. And the early stage is almost a honeymoon period of coming into a new culture and celebrating all of the newness. But as creatures, we also love things like our mama's home cooking, those comfort foods, the things that we grew up with. And when they're not available, we kind of head down into this little trough of despair where we start to celebrate in a negative way what's not the same. So this movement, and then eventually we come back out of that because we find an equilibrium. And if anything, our ability to adapt, if it was in a range that is between two lines, that those lines widen as we determine how, as a human, we are able to deal with the ambiguity with agility, to deal with the newness, with the change that surrounds us. And so I think this component of just being trained a little bit in it, and then having the experience, which you've had in multiple areas. You know, we're talking about your career here at Microsoft and what you've done. It's phenomenal. This view that you have to challenge yourself through that, I think, puts you in a better perspective to view the world through others, the lens of others. And when it comes to, as you're sharing there, when it comes to meshing across the cultures, that perspective is one that I think comes from not going into each situation with the end result self-determined, but going into the situation with an objective, a destination. But almost as we do in software development, when we think about agile, we may know where we want to head. We may have some specificity about that, but the path to get there can be highly varied. And if anything, the likelihood of a successful outcome is when you have the ability to vary that path. So I think bringing the cultures together is one that starts with the attitude of seeking to understand, of providing coaching, not diction and dictatorial statements, but providing coaching, and then of always being in a learning position so that the elements are understood and a path that is most acceptable can be found. The second part of your question I thought is a fascinating one because it's something that I am dealing with, that my leadership team is dealing with at multi-layers in the organization, which is variability and customization increases complexity. And so the ultimate model is one where you set it up once, you execute it the same, you then refine it, you fail fast, you improve, you execute, and you go through the cycle over and over and over again. You see successful people do this, by the way, as well as successful business process. In that regard, we are being very deliberate of determining what is that consistent fabric by which we will operate the business. What then do we do at a global level, and where do we augment it with the last mile local approach? So to think globally and then act locally where appropriate. And to me, that's one of the more challenging lines for a global leader to consider as businesses are built out in different geographies, as new product lines, same principle holds, as new product lines are added to the portfolio. It's been a fascinating process, and I think it's one of those ones, Rashawn, where there really is no end. It's continuous iteration.
Brilliant, Kevin. Like, I literally wrote down a couple of things that you said there, which I want to repeat back to you, right? Because I think this is super important around the clarity that you've just shared there. As it pertains to cultural adaptability, I love the context you provided. I actually wrote down immersion is a powerful thing because I feel like everything you talked about there is around how you immerse yourself into different cultures and how you learn and how you stay curious, right? And you talked a lot about, the growth mindset there, and just in terms of understanding, seeking to understand is how you put it. And I'll tell you, I remember a lot of some of the run-ins we've had in the Canada office, and I've always been so surprised at how much you know about South Africa, Zimbabwe, Morocco, which are countries, as you know, that are near and dear to me based on my background, right? And so it's been pretty cool to see your immersion. In South Africa, we actually have a word in the Zulu language. It's called sawubona, and it's essentially in Zulu, it means I see you. And it's an immersion into the other person, right? And then the next piece that you talked about around thinking global and acting local. and creating repeatable patterns around building them, assessing them, executing them, and measuring them, and continuously running forward with that pattern.
Here's an observation, and I literally just came back from spending a lot of time away from my family, and big thank you to them for allowing me to do that. I was in Latin America, through multiple points in Asia, in multiple points in Europe, North America. I'm heading off to India shortly, and then I'll be visiting the Middle East and Africa. What is amazing to me, and this is something very consistent, is that each country and leaders in the countries are very, very well attuned to what they need, what isn't working, what's working well, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, which is awesome. That is the job of a business professional, which I love. What isn't quite as apparent is that each country, and this is pan culture, feels that their situation is totally and utterly unique, that they and their country are the only ones that are facing the issues or the opportunities, that it's solely within their bounds, and they're special. Well, I love all my children. This is a scenario of just within our human psyche, I think, and you would have experienced this living across the world as you've done, that there's far more consistency. There are far more patterns that occur when you zoom out than when you are tightly intertwined. That concept of, do you see the forest or the trees? Like that idea, it absolutely holds true in running and operating a global business as well.
It sounds like you have a great leadership team, if I may say so.
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. No, my leadership team is phenomenal. And what's cool is, one of the aspects of leading business these days is this concept of scale leadership. And to me, scale leadership is this idea that you have very seasoned senior leaders who get there because of excellence in their careers. Scale leadership is that at every level in the organization, from individual contributor to frontline manager to managers of managers to managers of that group, and then to the executive leaders, that at every level, an individual's sense of what they're responsible for and scope and perspective, when it expands, that actually greatly enhances the perspective that they have of the business and their ability to execute, to be empowered, to be entrusted with the organization. And so driving scale leadership throughout the stack is just incredible. And I have to compliment my leaders for being diligent in that regard. I think one of the hardest and most important roles in an organization is the frontline manager role. We call it an M1, a first line manager. Yeah, you bet, you're one of them. It is just such an absolutely critical role for the impact it has in an organization.
Appreciate the recognition there. Thank you for that. And thank you to your leadership team if you're listening to this. And I want to say shout out to your family as well for supporting you throughout these travels. So much going on. A lot of cool places you're going to. Well, pretty much all cool places you're going to. So
Absolutely.
Wish you all the best and looking forward to seeing some posts and some shares from your learnings in those regions. I have to ask you about you for a second. You have a bit of high energy. I don't know if you know that.
I've been told that.
I've had the privilege of listening to a lot of your calls, listening to a lot of your talks with large crowds, big organizations. You just have a phenomenal way of just lighting the energy up in the rooms that you've been in, virtually or in person. At the same time, still so professional and authentic. Also never reluctant to make a joke about yourself at the same time, create a bit of light humor. Also share a little bit about something that is not in your probably mother tongue and speak another language or try another dish and just make a great call and drive a lot of excitement in the room, right? And I've always wanted to ask you this, right? I'd love you to share with me some tips firstly, in terms of how you do that so consistently. And what is a bad day for you?
Hey, Rashad, we all have bad days, and my bad days happen when I don't get enough sleep. That's when my bad days happen. I can go without eating all day and still be okay, but when I don't get enough sleep, it makes it harder. I just couldn't be more grateful for the opportunities I've had in my life. Growing up in let's call it middle class at best environment where my parents worked two jobs to ensure that we lived in a quality accommodation that was healthy and safe, that there was always food on the table. I just can't thank them enough for the opportunity, and the old adage that education is important. Well, I'm a living proof of that. So this idea of, I think when you have deep gratitude, to me, expressing it has been a very conscious choice for me, in the sense that I need to pay it back. And when I talk about paying it back, it's one of those of uh, sometimes maybe it could come across as being disingenuous, but deeply it's not. It is this idea of, even if I'm having a bad day, meaning haven't slept well, or there's something that's going on with one of my kids that I prefer didn't happen, or there's a big challenge at work that we haven't worked through yet. These are normal things that happen in everybody's life. For me, though, I believe that the best outcomes are driven when people feel a sense of trust, when they feel a sense of engagement, and when they feel listened to, and when they feel that they're operating in an environment where they can be their best and true self. We think about that in terms of diversity and inclusion. We also think about that in terms of individuals coming in and operating in an environment that is a place people want to be. And so I felt for a good chunk of my career, and I think, for a good chunk of my life, that I have the ability to alter the environment around me. Maybe that's a bit egocentric or self-centered, but I say that in the positive sense of, I've seen the benefits of being positive, of approaching things with constructive optimism in the response that I get from others. And I've also seen the converse of individuals who maybe the glass is always half empty, maybe the weather or the day is always cloudy. I've seen the impact of that within teams and organizations, and I just decided that I wouldn't be like that. And so I'm very, very conscious when I wake up and when I undertake my role, that I have a role to play. And my role to play is one of being my very best self when I am engaging. And so I think it's worked. I have to share that, my dear wife, Dr. Karen Peesker, this she pushes me like crazy. By the way, I think it's been very helpful to have a partner in my life who is a believer in what I do and pushes me. But she also leads by inspiration herself. My wife, when we were asked to move to Ireland, she wasn't able to work, so we have two younger kids. She started running marathons and then decided she would go back and do a PhD, which she did in London. We were living in Dublin at the time. Did a PhD, and then when she was finished doing her PhD, she figured, man, she could have an impact on others, and started up a sales center of excellence with the first sales program in the country of Canada, and now has received multiple awards. Tonight, I'm going to a dinner where she's been awarded top 100 most powerful women of Canada. And so I sit there and I go, well, what does she do? Right? Like, what does she do that allowed her to fight through the challenge days and be her best self and impact others so pervasively. And there is a deliberateness there. Regardless of where a person's starting point is, we can get better. I have that sense of optimism. We can do a little bit more. That sense of growth mindset that I truly believe has an impact on many.
Firstly, let me just say congratulations to Dr. Peesker.
Yeah, for sure. That's
And
fantastic, huh?
your
I go, well, you know, when I enter the room, I have a reasonable job. When I enter the room, like, she's the celebrity. It's fantastic.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I love the can get a bit better every day and every time.
Yeah.
You're bringing it back to what you shared earlier on in terms of your early days, your time in the prairies and the jobs that you've done and how competitive you were with yourself and always trying to get better every single day.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You said something there as well that was super important and something that you've regularly shared and you've talked about, which is education is important. And I've listened to you share a lot about tech skilling and how that's making an impact to the upcoming generations. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more with me around what do you mean by tech skilling and what does that mean for the upcoming generations that are coming to work for Microsoft? Because I'd love for you to share a little bit about tech skilling and what does that mean for the upcoming and current generations that want to come work here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is a topic that is deeply passionate for me, and it comes from a fundamental belief. So for those people who might be listening, either you believe or you don't believe, I hope I can convince you. It is that technical intensity is altering the fabric of how the world works. And it alters it in service industries, it alters it in manufacturing, it alters it in and across all industries and in the public sector through the service and support that is provided to citizenry. It is just a foundational element. And so with that as a foundation, it's then a statement of, okay, so, you know, we've seen this trend line occurring. I mentioned 32 years in the tech industry. So for 32 years, we thought that the next big thing, 5 years ahead of us, was foundational and nothing else would come. And then it's the next and the next and the next. So the incredible iteration and ingenuity of humanity tells me that we have only just begun this journey. And if that's the case, and almost from a Moore's Law perspective, which is held true now for 40 years, I think, that from our starting point to the next 50 years plus, we will continue to see iterations and positive change in tech, and it will impact every industry. So if that's the case, and that's the foundation, oh my goodness, are we prepared? It is a reality, as I have traveled around the world, that the vast majority of countries are not taking this trend line seriously enough. What I mean by that is when we think of education at a kindergarten or at the age of 5 and 6, just as we stress language as a form of communication, do we stress engagement and understanding of aspects of technology? That there is a foundation that if every role will have technology infused in it, will be utilized. Well, how are we preparing the next generation for that? And I think that there's work to be done. The second element is for those people who are currently in the workforce. The world's changing very, very fast, and roles are changing very, very fast. It would be a tragic outcome if those individuals whose roles are adapting do not adapt with them. And we've seen this occur in sections of history as we've gone through the agricultural age to the industrial age. It is just a reality of humanity that we continue to advance while technology is moving things far faster than previous global shifts in economic output and economic engagement. And so this idea of skilling to me is, again, deeply passionate. In my last role as the president of Microsoft Canada, we focused, and I just can't thank my team enough for this, from a small idea or engagement I had with the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, where I was engaged in a briefing with the CIO, and he said, Kevin, we do not teach any of cloud technology. We don't teach data and how data can be utilized for technology. We don't teach these skills around cybersecurity at all. And it's not happening anywhere in the higher educational system. Can Microsoft please help? From that discussion, and it took us a little while, we had to build content, we had to get it ready, but now across Canada, in over 27 institutions, we have provided curriculum, we provided the ability and programs for individuals in colleges and in universities to gain access to in-demand skills. We then went further to provide full access to the capabilities that we have within Microsoft and LinkedIn Learning that has been accessed by over 1 million Canadians. So this is going far beyond those individuals in colleges and universities. It's going into the workforce itself to assist people with reskilling. And there is so much more that we can do. So from my perspective, I'm very passionate about this. I was past chair for many years of Canada's Tech Nation, which was the Information Association for Technology and Telecoms. I was chair of the board. It is a focus that group's had. And as I've traveled around the world, I'm seeing country after country, also from a governmental perspective, but most importantly from industry, have a significant push. It's an area that I'm very, very proud of.
I love that.
Microsoft for accentuating.
I absolutely love that. I love how you're leading, influencing, executing in all those areas at the same time. I could spend a lot of time talking to you about that. It's near and dear to my heart as well.
The world's in a different place right now than it was even a year ago. And for all the team members out there, for individuals listening in, my viewpoint on this one, 32 years, is I remember sitting with my dad and mom in a line for petrol in 1975 during the energy crisis. I then remember in 1982 a massive stock market crash. I remember high inflation and interest rates that were very high that caused a housing crash in 1990 and a recession. In 1997, I was in Seoul, Korea when the Asian currency crisis hit. In 2000, 2001, the dot-com crash impacted an entire ecosystem, and the belief that the internet would be something of value was lost for a moment there. And then, of course, the global financial crisis in 2008. For many people, it's been 10 years of pretty much an upward swing. My one message is, oh my gosh, the realities of the current macroeconomic landscape with inflation, interest rates, energy costs, they are real. Supply chain disruptions, they are real. But it is a moment in time. And humanity has persevered moments in time to, it's similar to my previous discussion, to not only ride the peak, but also navigate the trough. And I have confidence that people will do that. And just my one advice on this for others, because I have to check myself too, is think about what's truly in a person's control, focus on that, put the energy there, far better than putting energy where there is no ability to control the outcome or the circumstance. Focusing on what you can control and being deliberate in that. That's good for the head. It's also good for the heart and the soul. So that would be my advice there.
But I know I got to let you go. I want to end us off with a little bit of light note. What do you do for fun, Kevin?
First, what I like to do, I love spending time with my family. coaching. I've coached soccer, baseball, ice hockey for my son, ice hockey for my daughter, and it's great to be involved in the community in that sense. And I still, even though I travel a lot for business, Rashawn, I still love to go out and see the world. So that's what I do for fun. My last bit is I read quite extensively, both brain candy in the form of international thrillers, and then also I love a good biography. I find it fascinating to see how other people have navigated their life and challenges and opportunities and circumstances. So that's really cool. Hey, one of the funnest things, fun story for you was I had the good fortune of going to New Zealand. And down in the southern island of New Zealand is this incredible place called Queenstown. It is surrounded by mountains. It's on the edge of a beautiful, beautiful lake. But my Kiwi friends, they are extreme. And so on my first day in Queenstown, I signed up, arrived late afternoon. I signed up for this activity the next day, which they called the Awesome Foursome. And in one day, I took a jet boat ride where it feels like you're going to hit into the cliffs, a jet boat ride up rapids. I then hopped into a helicopter, and the helicopter flew us through the canyon. I thought I'd lose my cookies. Then landed, jumped into, walked up a cliff onto a bridge, jumped off the cliff with a little tether of a bungee attached to my feet, 200 feet down towards the water below, was dropped off in a boat, and then whitewater rafted out of the canyon through rafting, and fell out twice because the rapids were so large. That was a great day. Not for everybody, but for me, I love
it. Thank you for sharing that. It sounds pretty extreme. It does. It sounds fun, but extreme. Kevin, you're a special human being. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I sincerely appreciate having this conversation with you. It's been super, super cool to learn from you, and how you took me through all these stories with so much of context and clarity. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this, and I know everybody watching and listening will too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashawn, for what you're doing to share some insights, and really appreciate it. Also, congratulations on the tremendous career here at Microsoft. We love what you do.
Thank you very much.